they describe Viktor Orbán as an authoritarian. Are you working for a nationalist extremist regime?
Well, no, I'm not. They started to describe Hungary as an evil country, but then something changed, and I think that change was Trump.
Your prime minister's instinct to fight against chemical castration of children, how did he know to go against it?
He's a devoted Christian. He thinks that the foundation of modern politics in Europe should be Judeo-Christian.
The media is yelling at you and your party saying you need more people.
Because of our migration policy, we have to pay €1 million fine every day. Because
every single day you have to pay a fine?
Isn't it insane?
Director Orbán, thank you for coming into PragerU. It's such a pleasure to sit with you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
You know, for the longest time, I think Eastern Europe looked at the West to try to save it. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Well, I agree with you with the statement, but you know what? Hungarians, it's a small landlocked country with 10 million people with a rich history, 1,000 years old country. But, you know, our goal is really not to educate others, but you know, like try to save ourselves. And this is why we got into confrontation with some modern Western values like wokeism and some others, because we realized quite early that these ideologies are actually destroying the society and making it harder for our nation to thrive again, which is our goal. So this is why we are trying to save and protect ourselves, to provide security and economic opportunities for our people. But we're still integrated into the West, and we hope that there is still a possibility for the West to regain control, if I may put it that way.
Well, I think things are changing somewhat, at least in the United States. I'm not sure about Europe.
Yeah, I'm much positive about the United States.
I mean, when you read about how the Europeans think about Viktor Orbán and your party, they describe Viktor Orbán as an authoritarian, as a complete nationalist extremist. And I'm curious, what is your answer to that? Are you working for a nationalist extremist regime?
Well, no, I'm not. So 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was very hard for us to defend our country, because as I just mentioned it, I'm speaking a language which is very rare. Only 12 million people speaks that language on earth. So if you want to understand what's going on in Hungary and how the internal political environment looks like, you have to speak the language. Otherwise, you are just an outside observer. And for this reason, no one was really interested in Hungarian politics. But the liberals, based on their I think crazy foreign policy agenda, they started to portray countries which were not in line with the liberal agenda as evil countries, and they started to describe Hungary as an evil country. But then something changed, and I think that change was Trump, because when Trump came in 2016, and the American people started to realize that how biased the liberal media, the mainstream media is with Trump, that they are saying nonsense things about him. So you can argue about whether his policies are good or not, personally, and you can argue about many things, but like portraying him as a fascist, authoritarian evil is just false, and all the Americans understood it. And then I think that was the game changer, when they started to realize, average American citizens, that if it can happen with President Trump, that it can also happen with other leaders who are also portrayed as evil. And then the American conservatives started to discover what's going on in Hungary, and many people came and they realized that no, it's not a perfect country, but it's completely rational, common sense-based policies. We try to support families. We try to protect national sovereignty. We keep the illegal migrants out. You can walk in a safe and sound way on the streets, and we're trying to make our economy better. And for the liberals, this is something radical, and this is something nonsense. So now I think the situation is changed very much, and we are in a more convenient position, if I can say that.
When you talk about Orbanism, it almost become this phrase that people use. I think the things that come to most people's minds are your view of immigration and the very strong borders that Hungary has erected around its country, and your view around the LGBTQ advocacy and policies. I know that there was a lot of friction between the Biden administration and Viktor Orbán's administration over the LGBTQ stuff. And not only have you been resisting, I guess, what you would call the post-liberalism expectations of what Hungary should do, you've actually been penalized for resisting it by the EU, right? So for those who haven't really followed Hungary closely and its battle with post-liberalism, can you just describe to us what has been going on and how you've been penalized for really, I guess, standing up for your values and ideology?
Yeah. So first of all, what is very hard to understand from an American point of view is the European Union, and how the European Union as a supranational entity is operating, and how the member states can move within the European Union. The European Union itself was, and it's still, I think it's a good initiative, because the idea was that we should have a common market, because then we are talking about 450 million people, and it's good from the economical point of view than having 27 separated member states. That's how the story started. But since then, the European Union, the transnational body bureaucracy, a kind of a European deep state, was created. And now they are using all their legal tools against the member states. And what they are working on is the further centralization of the power. And if you are not and they are not neutral at all anymore, as all deep state powers, they are liberal, and they are pushing liberal policies forward. And the member states within the European Union, they are trying to protect their own interest. And that's the reason why we have the confrontation on various issues. The first story, as you mentioned, was the migration case, when, from one day to another, we realized that 400,000 people are trying to march across our country, and it created a chaos. And my prime minister said that, no, it's not tolerable. So we have to restore law and order. Immigration is not the right. It's protecting the country. This is what our constitutional obligation is. Everybody has the right to apply for asylum, but they have to wait and cooperate with the authorities. If it doesn't happen, that we have to close the borders. And this is what happened. And immediately the European Union, which was dominated by liberal forces, and the big member states also had liberal governments, they tried to force Hungary to open its borders. And right now, so today, after 9 years, we are under financial sanctions because of our migration policy. We have to pay €1 million fine every day, because
every single day you have to pay a fine for not letting more immigrants in, or for not allowing more illegal immigration.
Yeah, not letting more immigrants in. So isn't it insane? I mean, and if I mention it to American friends, they all tell me that, oh, you are very lucky because that's a cheap deal. So it would cost you much more if you let them in.
If you did let them in.
Yeah, but still, isn't it outrageous? So I think it is. And the same happened with the woke ideology story, when we realized that, oh my God, this is something which is coming, and first through the culture, but sooner or later it will be pushed by NGOs. It will be forced to take into the media, to the education, and as you mentioned, the American ambassador personally himself is leading the movement the woke movement on Hungary, and they put pressure on everybody who is not signing up for that. We realized that this is something very, very dangerous, and we have to unite the Hungarians. And we organized a referendum, and like huge amount of people, even those who disagree with the government on political issues, voted against the gender propaganda in schools, in media. And then we created an institutional and the legal framework which makes it impossible to push gender ideology in kindergartens, in school, and through media. Then the whole blow up happened in the European Union, and still we are under legal procedures, and they withhold our funds because we are not signing up for the gender ideology. This is the everyday reality, and this is why I would describe Hungary as a European country which is defending its values against the transnational liberal elites in Europe.
Where do you think your prime minister's instinct to fight against gender-affirming care and the early castration and really chemical castration of children, how did he know to go against it when so many world leaders, they want to take the money, they want to be part of the club, they want to be loved by the EU, they wanted to be loved by, the West. He somehow felt like he had to just take what it needs to take and push against it at serious critical loss. I mean, it sounds like this has become an obsession of the EU, so much so that they're willing to put pressure on another country.
And it's much worse since President Trump was reelected, because all the transatlantic elite people now look Brussels as a power center for themselves. So the pressure is getting
and their whole focus is just the LGBTQ stuff. That's like with everything that's happening in the world, with the economy and energy and all of that.
Crazy.
Their absolute obsession is this. But somehow Viktor Orbán knew not to succumb to the pressure. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from the religious and moral background of him, because he's a devoted Christian, and he thinks that the foundation of modern politics should be in Europe, the Judeo-Christian heritage. And from that point of view, you look on what they are promoting, and in a very simple way, you can say that it's wrong. I mean, it's obvious that it's from a moral point of view, it's wrong. And in politics, there are just globalization and technology makes things a little bit more complicated. But if you don't listen to these voices, then it's obvious that in politics, there are still things which are related to basic values and related to things which are just generally wrong or generally good. And politicians should act in favor of promoting good things and resisting against bad things. And this is the Hungarian innovation, if I may call it that way. And honestly, in the long term, it pays off. You just have to survive. This is what happened with the migration issue. So all European countries which made the decision that they let the migrants in, now they are suffering. They have the protests, they have the terror attacks, they have the parallel societies. Meanwhile, in Hungary, things are safe and sound. So even if in the short term, it seems to be a harder path, in the long term, that's the good thing to do.
Right, and that's ultimately what makes of a good leader, one who is able to see around corners and not just focus on the current pressure. Do you think, I've been reading now that Italy, Austria, maybe even Spain, they're thinking about changing their immigration laws. Do you think that Hungary is impacting them? And do you think it can even be salvaged over there?
Well, what I see now in Europe is that there is a lot of communication. So even the liberals realize, just as it happened with the Democrats, that they realize that, it's not sustainable, their open door policy and their communication about, being positive with all the things. If you are not, then you are racist, because even they realized at the end that it's not sustainable. And they changed their communication. They didn't change their policies, but they changed their communication. And this is exactly what is happening in Europe, that the liberals, they realize that they have to use a different language. but in reality, the policies are remained unchanged. So, honestly, stopping illegal migration, it's not so complicated. So from the policy point of view, it's not a complicated issue. You just have to use your money, resources to stop people on the borders and not letting them in. So if you are really and honestly committed, you can do it, because you deport those who are in your country illegally and you don't let the illegals in, and you create a system where you are able to prevent them to enter illegally into your country and to provide them opportunity to apply for asylum from outside. Full stop. This is it. It's quite simple. You just need to use your resources. So if it doesn't happen, it's not because it's impossible. It's not because it's a complex issue which cannot be solved under modern circumstances, but it's because in reality, they don't want to do it.
Why?
They still want immigration.
Why? Why do they want illegal immigration?
Because they are their voters. They will vote for liberals. So nobody who is coming to Europe as an illegal migrant would vote for a Christian democratic political party. No one. Because they want liberals and socialists. So they want the socialists who are providing social aid for them, and they vote for the liberals who don't push Christian society-based values and force them to accept these values.
But don't they care about the fact that many of the immigrants that are coming in can't be properly inculcated into the society? And, oftentimes we know that illegal immigration could lead to a lot of crime and infrastructure problems. Don't they care about that? They care so much about their votes?
Yes, because what they realize is their popularity rates are going down. So it's like they have to do something against it. And for this reason, they want to speed up the process, because the more people they are bringing in, and the more people they are able to manage to have voting rights, it will increase their support. So it's a paradox, but it's still true that unfortunately, if the situation is getting worse, then there's speeding up the process in reality to counter the loss what they have. So this is what's going on in unfortunately in Europe. There are some countries, you mentioned Italy. I think that's a prime and a good example where people voted for a national conservative government, and they are trying to do their best. But there is no on the European level, there is a change in the communication, but there is no change in the real policy arena. You just have to follow what's going on with Hungary. If the EU says that, we are supporting the Hungarians, it would mean that there is a change in the policy. But until that, I think it's just communication,
so you
unfortunately.
Think very possibly the folks in Spain or the leadership in Austria or even Italy, they're looking at Hungary and saying, well, the EU is penalizing Hungary for doing these things. We don't want to step up and stop illegal immigration into our countries because the EU will punish us.
So in Spain, there is a liberal government in charge, and all liberal parties get united. Although the people voted for the conservative parties as a coalition, they could form a majority and they could keep the power. So what is going on now is the liberals are desperately, they do everything and they make a compromise with everybody else to keep the right out of power. And the same happened in Austria, where the most popular party who won the election was the so-called Freedom Party, which is an ally of the Fidesz party in Hungary. And all the other parties, the so-called mainstream parties from the right and from the left, they formed a coalition against them to keep them out from power and stopping the radical change on the migration policy. The same thing happening in France and the same thing happening in the Netherlands, where they could form the coalition around Wilders, who won the elections, but the coalition collapsed because Wilders and his party was the only one who was saying that, look, people voted for me because they wanted from me to stop immigration. And what you are doing, you are just hijacking this, and it cannot go on like this. So the coalition did break up. So the fight in Europe is still going on for the soul of Europe, I think.
I listened to an interview that you were on with the BBC. I actually recommend, as much as I don't want to promote the BBC, I actually do recommend that episode because it was such a reflection of how the animosity towards Viktor Orbán is propagated through European media. And one of the things that the interviewer was fixated on was about the replacement rate in Europe, right? Not having enough children in order to replace Europeans, and illegal immigration is supposed to be the solution. I mean, I had to replay the question several times because he was effectively screaming at you saying, do you have enough Hungarians living in Hungary? Why aren't you allowing more illegal immigrants into the country in order for you to have a replacement rate, which to me was a twilight zone because on the one hand, these post-liberals say that humans are parasites on Earth, that we should not have more children, that, you send your child to college, you send your daughter to college, you tell her to not have more children, right, and to focus on becoming a corporate slave instead, right? And then on the other hand, the media is yelling at you and your party saying you need more people. And so I'm wondering, how do you reconcile this problem that Europeans have? They know they don't have enough people because they're not having enough children. And so in order to have enough people, they're bringing in more illegal immigrants into their countries, and they're expecting you in Hungary to do the same.
Yeah, that's the story. And in a nutshell, and this is why we are telling them that, look, we don't want to give you advices, so you can do with your country whatever you want. But like, we think you made the decision that you have demographic problems, and you want to solve that through illegal migration. That's up to you, your decision. But we would like to take a different path because we think that it might be too risky. So that's the only thing what we say, that it's risky because those who are coming in, they are coming from a different society, and they just now don't seem to be wanting to get integrated into your systems, but they want to preserve their own identity. And if there is a confrontation between the two identities, then it's getting very tensionous immediately, and it's very hard for them to integrate into the labor market. So then you spend your money on these policy issues, how to integrate people. It's an enormous amount of money which could have been spent to other issues, for example, supporting families, supporting your own families. And that's where the Hungarian position comes in, that what we want is just to leave us alone. So we don't want to force you to follow the Hungarian approach, but please don't force us to follow your approach. And our approach is that even if it's harder and even if it's more complicated, and we are very transparent on that, so supporting families and changing the demographic decline for every developed country, it's a challenge. It's the biggest challenge. And we Hungarians are trying to figure it out, how to solve it. And it costs a lot of money for us, because another liberal lie is that they say that the pro-family policy type of people are trying to put pressure on the individuals to have children. This is a lie. So according to every public opinion poll in the United States, Great Britain, Hungary, people want to have more children that they actually, at the end, they end up having. And for this reason, the state has an obligation to support the people who want to have more children. They just don't get enough support from the government. So we want to spend our money on not integration of the migrants, which is a very risky procedure under the current circumstances, but on supporting those who want to have more children. So, for example, we just introduced another measure, family policy measure from next year. Mothers with more than 2 children, so 2, 3, 4 or more children, they don't have to pay any income tax in their entire life. So that would benefit you, for example, as well, greatly. And because we are trying to figure out how to combine tax cuts with family policies, solving the housing issues with family policy, solving the demographic issues. And this is an experiment, what we are doing. But just please leave us to try to figure it out and do not force us to follow this crazy suicidal migration policy, what you promote. This is the general debate now.
Do you ever consider, given the fines that the EU puts on your country, that you don't want to be part of the EU anymore?
Well, unfortunately, this is not a reality or a potential reality for us, because we are in the middle of Europe, and we are a proud European. So the Hungarian identity is linked to the identity of being part of the West and being part of Europe, even like to defend Europe, and through the European Union we have access to the market. So our strategy is not to leave, but to reform the European Union, because it's still, I think, I deeply believe that it's still undecided what future the European Union will have, and it still can be saved, as the Americans are still believe that the American state can still be reformed or saved from the deep state. I truly believe that it's the case in Europe as well. So what we are doing is not leaving, but try to reform it and try to. This is how it is described by my prime minister, that we should occupy Brussels in a sense that changing the institutional culture from within, because if we are not doing it, they will bring all European nations down, and we cannot let it happen.
So it's one of the ways you're trying to reform Brussels and the EU is through your lawsuit against them? Maybe you can explain the lawsuit.
We are doing that as well. We organized a party coalition, an international coalition of national conservative parties. It's called the Patriots. Now is the third largest party in the European Parliament. We want to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. They are very successful on local elections. My prime minister is in the council meeting, so he is voting in the name of Hungary. We are always looking for allies. It's a complex, complicated issue, but it's not impossible to find allies. For example, in the Ukrainian-Russian war, now it seems we have Slovakia also, when we both are more on the American side, that we should be just neutral observers, not getting into that conflict, but get back the track of diplomacy as quickly as we can. So an alliance can be formulated by coalitions in the council, and we have think tanks and in Brussels, and we try to work together with other national conservatives from other parties to figure out what's going on and give an alternative future for the European Union.
Well, you mentioned the Ukrainians.
But it's a long fight, so it's not going to work like this.
All important fights take a long time, I guess. You mentioned the Ukrainians and the Russians, and I know there's been much criticism against Viktor Orbán when it comes to his lack of involvement and lack of support of Ukraine. And your response is you're somewhat neutral, but I'd love to hear your perspective on whether the West and other countries should get more involved in defending Ukraine. And is the reason why you're not pushing against Ukraine is because of your reliance and entanglement with Russia and their natural gas and resources that you buy from them?
So actually, the story is, I think it will be quite similar just as the migration story. So my prime minister, when the Russian invasion started, which is obviously unacceptable and it's a clear violation of international law, but day one, my prime minister warned everybody that it's not an opportunity for the West to create a proxy war through Ukraine against Russia, because if we consider the situation like this, it will drag us into a war which we will lose, and it will cause serious harm for the West, and many people will die, and in the end for nothing. So he warned that the interest of the West would be to use diplomacy to make a compromise and to have a long-term agreement between the West and Russia. This idea was rejected, and the Biden administration was pushing all European member states to sign up for this proxy war, military support Ukrainians, and so on and so on. From the humanitarian point of view, I think we are doing our best because we are a neighboring country. So we are many Ukrainian refugees are coming, and we have the biggest humanitarian operation in Ukraine and in Hungary, supporting the Ukrainian community. But we rejected to support them militarily, but because we were saying that this military conflict leads us nowhere. So leads us in a very bad place where hundreds and hundreds of people are dying for nothing. And what happened? Like after 3 years, this is where we are now. So my prime minister last year, when he was president of the European Council, he decided to make a peace mission. And he visited Kiev, then he went to Moscow, then he went to Beijing, then he met with the NATO leaders, and then he met Trump. And he wrote a letter, just 2 pages, where he described the situation that the problem now is that both parties, the Ukrainians and the Russians, based on different calculations, are committed on the continuation of the war. So they have an argumentation why they have to continue to fight. So what he was saying is that if we want to end this conflict, we need neutral outside mediators, mainly the United States, but it could be also a coalition together with China and Turkey and some other countries, and Europe for sure, where we jointly put pressure on both sides to give it up and to make an agreement. And if we are not doing that, first, my prime minister warned the Europeans that America will re-elect Trump, and Trump will have a different approach on that issue, and Europe will left alone. And this is exactly what happened. And unfortunately, since then, the European Union decided to further continue Biden's policies on the war and not supporting Trump. So there is now a conflict between United States and Europe, because the Europeans are just having the continuation of Biden's policies on the war, and they are just undermining Trump's effort to find a way, which would be very complicated, because as my prime minister described, both parties have an argumentation why to continue it. So it's even for the United States and even for the president of the United States, it's a very complicated diplomatic efforts. But we have some success. So restoration of communication channels, direct talks between US and Russia, direct talks which was initiated by the president between Ukraine and Russia, which didn't happen for like 3 years, and some prisoners exchange. But so far, unfortunately, they were not able to reach a short-term sustainable ceasefire.
What do you think Hungarians' reactions are to Donald Trump's approach for diplomacy?
I think it's a very good approach. We Hungarians, we are very much, and not just the political elite or the politicians, but the average Hungarian citizens, they are very thankful to Donald Trump. And I think it's not just in Hungary, but it's in many other places, because finally a leader came and told that, morally, our obligation is to make peace, or at least, even if it seems impossible, we should try. And if we fail, we should try again, because that's how politics and leadership should look like. So the Hungarian average voters are very thankful to President Trump for this new approach, and they understand how complicated it is, and the entire media and everybody, as you see, it's turning against him, as they are turning against my prime minister. So you are immediately a Putin puppet and a Russian asset and so on and so on. So this crazy accusations you get, but the goal is to achieve peace and to stop a nonsense war, which would really, as it was said by the president, it should have never started. So I think many people are very thankful to him.
You mentioned media. We can't sit here without talking about social media and how it has impacted our countries. Obviously, you see vile things written about our president, Donald Trump. There's vile things written about, your prime minister, Viktor Orbán. Plus, we know that there are NGOs like Soros-backed NGOs that are propagating all kinds of ideas online. There's China that has gotten involved, and the Russians have gotten involved, and so there is a new frontier of war, which is social media. And I'm curious, how does your country view the impact of social media on politics?
Well, we have a debate going on in Hungary about this foreign influence in domestic politics, and it turned out that in 2022, the Soros network and the network behind the Democrats, USAID, and the usual suspects were interfering in the Hungarian elections on the opposition side, so that the Hungarian opposition, and I'm talking about the political party, talking about the media environment, talking about the NGO networks, were supported by liberals from outside to overthrow the Hungarian government. And this is not just a conspiracy theory, so it's factually proven that this is what happened. And we try to figure out a legal construct when it's not happening again. As you can imagine, they try to portray it as a freedom issue. Only those media outlets are arguing against the proposed legislation who were financed, surprisingly, by foreigners. So none of the serious countries can accept a situation where politics is financed from outside. So if American politics is financed from China, or Chinese politics is financed from United States, or German politics is financed from France, or French politics is financed, it's unacceptable. And I think we Hungarians, we know that we are a small country, and if you don't have to have too much money to get an influence in Hungarian politics. But if we let it happen, that we lose actually our sovereignty. And this is what our ancestors were fighting for like 1,000 years. Okay, probably a couple hundred years ago, they came in a different way, but our people were fighting with the same mindset to preserve the right of the Hungarians to decide the future of their own country. And it didn't change since then. So we try to figure out a legal way and a legal mechanism, a constitutional mechanism, how to protect the Hungarian politics from foreign influence. But as you can imagine, it's just we are again like treated as the most evil political force on earth.
Well, it's a tough thing for me as an American. I hate to say this, but I think we almost take freedom of speech for granted in the United States of America because, we're born in this place. And so, Of course, we can, have political dissent. But I am aware of the fact that foreign adversaries are taking advantage of our freedom of speech. And they take advantage of the fact that we believe in this so much, and we continue to believe in it, even though it creates this kind of exposure, right?
So I'm just in the United States and in Hungary. Every day there is a demonstration. Previously, it was definitely financed from outside. I don't know now, but like these Antifa gender people, but just like a couple hundreds of people every day, they are shouting on the streets and protesting against the government. But we let it happen. Yeah. That's freedom of speech. It has a cost, but But there are some rules, like you can speak freely, but this kind of foreign influence without being noticed, it's a democracy problem.
Yeah, it's becoming very scary. What are your thoughts on the war between Iran and Israel now? We're sitting here in the middle of this incredible, crazy time around the world. Yeah. Have you and the Prime Minister had any official ideas or thoughts of what should happen in the region? And
so, first of all, for us in Hungary, we still have the largest Jewish community in Hungary, and they are having a cultural revival. The streets of Budapest are very safe compared to the Western capitals, and our first and foremost duty in this situation is to protect them. That's our priority number one in every situation like this, because they are Hungarians and the Hungarian state has a duty to protect them. The second thing, what we learned is that if we have a war on the Middle East, sooner or later it will have a direct negative effect on our country. So, because after the so-called Arab Spring, couple years later, millions and millions of illegal migrants were showing up on our borders, which caused a serious security problem for our country. So we learned that a big war on the Middle East is something which is very dangerous for the Western world. So we support every initiative which is about to find a way to find a peaceful solution. And the third thing is the experience. So during the first term of Donald Trump, he was able to manage a peace process between the Arab countries and Israel. And that was a historical achievement. So, and it's proven that he's capable of doing it. At the end, this is his intention, to bring peace even in this very fragile and very complicated situation to the Middle East. So we hope that he will find a way how to achieve that. And it was proven during the previous term.
But it's interesting that you say that, because on the one hand, I think people view Hungary now as nationalist, almost isolationist, didn't want to really get involved, didn't want to get involved with Ukraine and just kind of let other countries have their own problems. But on the other hand, you're saying that maybe America shouldn't be entirely isolationist and should somewhat get involved in what's happening in the Middle East, because what you're saying, am I summarizing this correctly, what happens in the Middle East never just stays in the Middle East, it somehow spills over to the rest of the world. And so, how does Donald Trump reckon with both ideas of wanting to basically focus only on our nation here, the United States of America, but yet again get involved with the Middle East, and what does that even mean? Sometimes diplomatic talks don't necessarily yield peace.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a very complicated issue, and it has to be decided by the Americans and now by the President of the United States of America. But whether you like it or not, America's position in the world is different than Hungary's position in the world. It's a different responsibility. As well. We are just a small mouse in a room full with elephants. So it's like, this is why we should all be very cautious on what giving advices to other countries. We have our principles and we have our priorities, like supporting the Hungarian Jews, accepting the right of Israel to defend itself, but deeply believing in diplomacy, that through diplomacy we are able to prevent war, which would be very bad if we have a long war. It would be very bad for everyone. So this is the Hungarian. These are the Hungarian priorities, and this is what we can promote. But the responsibility of the big countries, U.S., Russia, China, it's very big, because in an upcoming 10, 20, 30 years, when we have this world order transition period, the situation everywhere will be very fragile. And it's not just a single issue. Similar things will happen, unfortunately, in other places as well, not to mention any specifically. But the community of mankind has to understand that this is the new reality where we're living. The Pax Americana is not there, and if we can find a modus vivendi, can find a power balance between the big players, that there will be no Pax at all, and that's not a good good future for the mankind. So I think everybody should support those politicians on both sides, so eastern side, western side, who seem to be committed to understand this challenge and act in accordance with it.
One of the things that I read that Hungary has done recently is withdraw from the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Can you explain why you did that?
We realized that the ICC, so the criminal court, became an over-politicized institution. So this is what I try to describe. So when we have a change of the world order, then all the international organizations have to adapt, and they have to find a strategy for themselves, whether they will adapt to the new world order, and their goal will be to make this transition period smoother, or they become like guardians of the ancient regime and they resist. And the ICC, I think, made the decision that they still on the side of the liberal, globalist, anti-Israel agenda, and they politically intervened into conflicts, into the Ukrainian-Russian conflict and into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well. And based on their decisions, they made the potential peace agreement, the achievement of of a potential peace agreement, harder. And honestly, we Hungarians think that we don't need international institutions like this. We need international institutions which are dedicated to make peace efforts in every single conflict easier. But if you make decisions which are making it impossible to have direct contacts with the leaders, with those leaders with whom, without them, it would be impossible to make a peace agreement, then it's simply, it's not a sustainable position in the 21st century. So this is why we made the decision to withdraw.
Director Orbán, one of the things we try to do here at PragerU is to teach what isn't taught. And oftentimes we really do go against what you'll find in most traditional universities. I'm sure it's not exactly what's being taught in European universities. You know, this idea that humans are parasites on earth and that we should not have more children, that women should become corporate slaves and have a career before they have children. I have a career, but I have children too. And I always say the most important thing I've ever done is have kids. We teach that countries should have sovereignty, should have access to energy, because energy, he who has energy actually thrives and wins. These are things you'll never hear in most colleges and universities. And I'm curious, now that you have an opportunity to speak to the millions of people that watch PragerU, if you could correct what should be taught, right? If you could actually teach what should be taught but isn't being taught, you're here in the West, what would you like to share as final words that, you know, citizens of the world can just get a little more common sense?
It's the most complicated question today. So I think the major problem or the biggest problem of contemporary education, not just higher education, but also elementary school and high school education, is that I think education, in a sense, to give you knowledge about professions, should be combined with general kind of upbringing, that you become a better person, a responsible citizen, a member of a community, and you get a kind of a sense of upbringing, physically, mentally, value basis, and so on. And good education, but it's not innovation. The ancient Greeks were knowing that very well, and this is how they educated their children. So So it's an old knowledge. A general type of education should be combined with this kind of upbringing. And if we in Western Europe and in the United States, so in the Western world, we forget it and we let it go, and we will substitute it to some kind of trendy indoctrination, then it's going to be very hard, and without noticing it, we will have a generation of people who really hurt by these bad ideologies, and then could have a devastating consequence of our peace and possibility of prosperity. So everybody should focusing on how to restore this ancient kind of knowledge of combining the general type of upbringing where people can simply differentiate between good and bad, and a classical type of education where you get to be a good lawyer or economist or whatever you want to be.
Yeah, well, and certainly that would be the baseline to expect that our leadership will have that kind of discernment, right? If they understand what is true and what is beautiful and what is right, and so that when they make these decisions, it's not just based on whatever social media trend or woke trend is coming our way. Final words. You're here in the United States. What are you hoping to accomplish during your visit here?
Well, I will have opportunity to meet with the United States, many of the new leaders of the administration. What I experienced recently is that they are doing great in foreign policy. So I think this America First policy initiative is very good in a sense that we as Hungarians, we can connect to that, because we have our own foreign policy agenda, which is Hungary first. Mm-hmm. And if you have two countries with two national interest-driven policies, then you can find the common ground. It's in a very easy and pragmatic way. When the American foreign policy was about liberal interventionalism or international ideologically driven foreign policy, that was almost impossible to connect to that for a conservative country like Hungary. So I'm very optimistic, and we're trying to make agreements which mutually benefits people of United States, although I understand that for them probably Hungary is not the most important country because we are small, but still the US administration's duty is to make decisions which benefit in every aspect the citizens of US, and we have to make agreements which are good for the people of Hungary, and this is what I'm looking for.
Well, I'll end with this. Every Hungarian I know is incredibly competitive. And so it is not a surprise to me that you like the concept of America First and why it resonates. And it's been really a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your openness and honesty. And
Thank you very much. I appreciate
welcome to America. It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good luck for PragerU.